Welcome to my video. In this video we're going to learn about data types for programming in AQA's GCSE in computer science. The data types you'll need to know are integer, real, which is more commonly known as float, character, string and boolean. An integer is a whole number used only for calculations and can be either a positive or negative value. A float is a decimal number that is also used for calculations and can also be positive or negative. A character is a single alphanumerical unit or character, for example the letter N on its own, or the letter P on its own, or maybe even a symbol such as the @ symbol on its own. In fact, it could even be a number on its own, however it would have no mathematical value. A string is a set of characters. They are not used in calculations as they also have no mathematical value. The final one is Boolean. Boolean can either be true or false. They are often used to indicate if a condition is met or not. Here I have grouped together integer and float. The reason for doing this is they closely relate to maths. In maths you can add two whole numbers together. You can also add two decimal numbers together, but you can also add a whole number and a decimal number together. This works exactly the same in programming, hence the reason why I've grouped integer and float. I've also grouped character and string. The reason for doing this is because 1. String is made up of characters, and also they relate quite closely to English rather than maths. When adding letters together in English you create words. When adding words together you create sentences. This is similar to programming, but when adding strings or characters together, this is called concatenation. Concatenation is a key word you'll need to know for your exam. When concatenating, you can also concatenate numbers and symbols that are inside of the strings or characters. However, they will have no mathematical value, and we'll learn more about this as we go deeper into this video. The next one is Boolean. Boolean give a true or false indicator for a condition that is met or not met. So we could run that on the ones above. So for example, we could check if two integer values are equal to each other. Is 5 equal to 5? And this could give a Boolean value of true. We could do is 5 greater than 8.3, and that would give a Boolean value of false. We could also look at characters and strings. We could do a check to see if a character is within a string and do a true or false Boolean return depending if it is. There are lots of scenarios that we can use Booleans in. In fact, there's lots of scenarios that we can use integers, reals, characters, strings and Booleans in. Let's take a deeper look at integers and floats. In your maths lessons you will see 5 plus 6, which you would say a whole number plus a whole number gives 11, which is the whole number. A whole number plus a decimal number would give a decimal number, and then a decimal number plus a decimal number would give a decimal number. It works exactly the same for computer programming. The computer would see this as an integer plus an integer is an integer plus a float gives a float plus a float gives a float. So let's have a look how we would do that in programming. So here I've got int and float, and this is me telling the computer program to either treat a value as an integer or treat it as a float. So for example purposes, I've passed 5 into both of them. Okay? So, to print that out onto the screen, I would need to put print in front of them. So let's see what would happen when we printed them. When we printed them, int 5 would print out 5 and float 5 would print out 5.0. And basically, this has told the computer to treat this value as a whole number, and it has done. It's printed out a whole number to the screen. Here, I've told it to treat 5 as a decimal number. So obviously it's placed the decimal part on the end of that number. And that's exactly what int and float would do. So what would happen then if I changed int to 5.2? Because I'm telling it to treat it as an integer and I'm passing in a decimal value. Well, pretty similar to what's happened here, but the reverse in fact. It would just literally ignore the back end. So it would say, well, int of 5.2 is 5, ignore anything after the decimal point. Let's take a look at an example using Python. I'm firstly going to create a variable called a, and I'm going to assign it the value 5. I'm going to create another variable called b, and I'm going to assign it the value 6. These are both integers because they're whole numbers. I'm then going to do answer equals a plus b. Answer is another variable. I'm then going to print out answer, and it will give me an answer of 11. An integer result. Let's turn b into a float by putting 0.2 on the end. Notice when I run this now that it will still work. This is because, just like maths, a whole number can be added to a decimal number, so therefore it still works. It is possible to tell the program what to treat the values as. So here I'm telling it to treat a as an integer. I'm also telling it here to treat b as a float. And when I run it, once again, I will still get the result of 11.2. Let's see what happens when I turn b into an integer. You can see now, when I run it, it will just ignore anything after the decimal point, because integers are whole numbers. Let's turn a into a float. When I run this now, you will see that 5 effectively will get 5.0. and it'll be added to 6.2. And again, we'll still get 11.2. And this is how integers and floats work. Okay then, let's take a look at characters and strings. So a character is a single alphanumerical character, and strings are made up of characters basically, but they have no mathematical value. So they're not like standard maths where you do 5 plus 5 is 10. They don't do that. They use concatenation where literally they bolt each together. Okay? So if we look at these here, I've got hello and world. And notice hello is a string and world's a string, but I've put a space at the front of world just so when I bolt them together I still get my space. So this is called concatenation. So when I run it, I would get hello world. Now strings are normally represented with quotation marks, okay, around them. And that's how it works. Let's look at how we do it in Python. So here, I've got str hello. I'm telling the computer program to treat whatever's inside the quotation marks as a string. Okay, I've taken the value hello, okay, I've turned it to a string. Now I want to print it out to the screen. So I'd use print str hello, and the outcome on my screen would in fact be hello, like so. Let's look at an example where I actually use concatenation then. So here, I've got str whirl, which is in fact a string because there is more than one. And here, I've got a character because it's on its own, so D. When I bolt those together, look, see if you can work out what I get world. Let's take a look at an example in Python. I'm going to create a variable called a, and I'm going to assign it the value hello. I'm going to create another variable called b, and I'm going to assign it the value world. Now, when we try and add these two together, it won't treat them mathematically because effectively they're both the data type string. Instead, it will do something called concatenation, and this is basically where it takes the two words, two strings, and it will bolt them together, as shown here now. So when I print this out, look, you can see that a plus b is in fact this time hello world with no space. Now, if I was to take b and I was to turn it into a character, because it's a single item, like so, and I was to turn a into hell, when I add them together now, I get hello. Now it is possible again to tell the computer program what data type to use them as. So here look, I've assigned them both string. When I add them, it still works exactly the same. Okay, I want to continue on character and string because I said that a character does not have any mathematical value. So here I've got an example where I've used a number, so I can show you what I mean by that. So here, I've got the number 5, and you can see that it's in quotation marks because I'm treating it at this point as a character. In other words, it's not going to be used mathematically. Normally when you use two numbers together, 5 plus 5, you get 10, or 5 plus 10 is 15. I'm not doing that. I literally want to concatenate it into a sentence. So hence the reason it's got quotation marks around it, because I want to treat it as a string or character so I can concatenate it. So if I was to run b plus a plus c, I would get I have 5 friends with no spaces. Now, when using the plus method, we are basically concatenating them, okay, into one string. Okay, what I might want to do is have some spaces in it. So the way around that is literally to put the spaces here. So now, rather than this being a character, space, 5, space, so that's technically a string there. Okay, I've put a space at the end of this one and a space at the start of this one. So now it would look like that. Okay, let's have a look how that works then. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable and I'm going to make it equal to 5 in quotation marks. This makes it a character so it has no mathematical value. So now I've got B, which is I have, and let's create one called C, which is going to be friends. And what we're going to do is we're going to construct a sentence from these using concatenation. So now I'm going to do print, and I'm going to do B plus A plus C. Now when I run this, look, notice that it prints, but it's literally bolted them together so there's no spaces. So what I'll do is I'll pop the spaces in now. So A now has technically become a string because it's got a blank space, a 5 and a blank space. So now you can see that it's worked. Now let's try using a symbol. So let's change, let's create D actually, and let's put hashtag friends. And let's replace C in the print with D. And you can see that that will still work absolutely fine. So there you go. What I've done there is I have added together using concatenation a number of strings. Let's take a look at Boolean then. So Boolean can either be true or false, and it's often used to indicate if a condition is met or not. Okay, so here in this first example I've got D, I've set its data type to bool and it's equal to true. Okay, but I've also got an if statement that says if D equals true, which basically reads if D is equal to true, print yes, else print no. Okay, so D is true. So if true equals true, print yes, else print no. What do you think it will do? Okay, well in fact here, look, well true is equal to true, so that's true. So therefore, it would in fact print out yes. Let's look at another scenario where I'm not using a variable that's set to true. So here I've got a equals 5, which is my variable, and I've got if a equals 4. So obviously I've got 4 there, which is a value, and I've got 5 there. So what data type is 5 and what data type is 4? Okay, so hopefully at this point you are saying that they're integers. Okay, so here I'm saying if 5 is equal to 4, well 5 is equal to 4, well that's false, isn't it? So this statement here is false because 5 is not equal to 4. So it would go down to the else and it would in fact print out no. Let's take a look at an example using Python. Here I've created a variable called a and made it equal to 5. And I've created another variable called b and made it equal to 6. Those are not booleans, those are in fact integers. Let's use an if statement then. So if a is greater than b, well this is a selection. So in this case it reads if 5 is greater than 6. Well in fact the answer to that would be false. So therefore that would be our boolean response to this if statement. So obviously if I was to run this then, what should happen is it will print out b is greater because it was false, so it would go down to the else on line 6, go inside and it would run line 7, print b is greater, as shown here. Let's change b to 2. So now it reads 5 is greater than 2. Well that's true, so it would now run line 5, a is greater. Now, it is possible to set the values of a variable directly equal to a boolean value. So here I've set a equal to true, and then I've set b equal to false. So a could effectively have been true or false, and b could have been true or false. Let's look at this in a scenario then. So here I've got if a equals true and b equals true. And that reads the same as basically saying if a is true and b is true, print both are true. Now if we look at this scenario here, well a is true on line 2 and b is false on line 3. So when we look at line 5, the response to that if statement is false, so it would not run line 6. Let's look at line 7, an elif. A equals true and b equals false. So now, if we look at that, well a is true and b is false, so this one would be true. So it would go inside of line 8 and this time it would print out a is true and b is false. Now I could create an else statement as well. So if neither the if or the else were true, well therefore it would run the else instead. And this time it would print out that a is, or must be, false. Because obviously the if statement checks if a is true and the else if statement checks if a is true. So therefore, if neither of those are true, well surely a must be false. Okay? So therefore it prints out a is true and b is false in this scenario. Let's try changing a to false and see what happens. Pause and see what you think. As you can see, it prints a must be false because neither the if statement or the elif statement are now true in this example. Okay then, let's take a look at what casting is. Casting is basically where we change the data type from one to another. And there's a number of reasons you might want to do that, and I'm going to explain now. So for example, you might want to change an integer to a string or vice versa. So in this example here, I've got 5, 10, I have apples, I have, and then apples. Okay, so I've got 4 variables. So I want to eventually say I have 15 apples. Okay, let's look at the data types. Feel free to pause and write them down before I put them on the screen now. So I have integer, integer, string, string. Now the problem now is, if I was to run that look, I would get a runtime error because it would take C plus A plus B plus D, and basically I would get an error on the screen saying that that it can't concatenate integers and strings together because the program's basically saying, well, do you want me to concatenate them and treat none of them mathematically? Do you want me to treat them all mathematically? And that runs into a few issues. If you wanted to treat them all mathematically, well, there's no number called I have and there's no number called apples. Okay? But if we treated them all as strings and concatenated them straight away, well then I'd end up with I have 5, 10 apples because there'd be no maths taking place. Okay? So let me show you a potential fix for this. So here, if I put C plus str A plus B plus D, it would in fact print out I have 15 apples. Now this again is where I'm going to relate it to maths. Now in your school you may learn about either BODMAS or BIDMAS, and we're going to look at the B at the front, which stands for brackets. So obviously you go to the deepest set of brackets first. So the way this would work here, it would go to the deepest set of brackets, which is this set here. It would do A plus B. So A plus B, 5 plus 10, would give me 15. It would then come outside of those brackets to here, and it would str the result. So it would take the result of 15, okay, and it would convert 15 to a string, okay. So effectively, it would put quotation marks around the 15, okay, in the background. So basically, it applied BODMAS. It did the maths first, okay, and then it converted it to a string. And this is the reason why we might want to cast variables, basically, because it enables us to use data that was originally used as maths, maybe, and then use them in strings, okay? And it allows us to convert between the two multiple times, okay? Let's take a look at an example of this using Python. Now, you've done this already without even realising. Casting is basically specifying the data type that you want to use. In some scenarios, it's really important to do this, such as the example here. A is 5, B is 10, C is I have, and D is apples. When I try and add these, I get an error message, because the computer doesn't know if you want to add them or concatenate them, because they're different data types, as shown here now with my hashtags. A is an integer, B is an integer, C is a string, and D is a string. So do you want to add them mathematically, or do you want to concatenate them? So, by specifying the data types, I can fix this. So here, using BODMAS, I can say str A plus B. So it will add A and B together, and then it will turn them into a string. So now it makes it so the program works. I have 15 apples. It is possible to specify them beforehand, but the issue with this is that BODMAS will no longer apply. So it will basically now put I have 10 apples, because it's concatenating the string value 5 and the string value 10. So therefore I need to go back to the original method of str A and B. It does the bit in the brackets first, A plus B, which will give it 15, and then it will turn that response into a string, because in BODMAS we do the brackets first. Okay then, to summarise, a character is a single unit of information. So for example, it could be the number 8 on its own, it could be G on its own, it could be a symbol on its own, such as the percentage sign. A string is multiple characters, so it could be, for example, hello. It could in fact be H31LO. Again, that's a string because it's a combination of any of the numbers, letters, or symbols. An integer is a whole number, like the example here, because it has no decimal point. A float, also known as a real, is a decimal number, for example, 3.4. The most common one you'll use in maths is probably pi. A Boolean is a true or false value. So something could be true or false, and sometimes in computing this is referred to true is equal to 1 and false is equal to 0. This relates to binary. Thank you for watching. I hope this video has helped. If you've got any questions, please feel free to get in contact.